I'm Sunita and I live in Lancaster. I work at Lancaster University and I have a family, a young family, and I come originally from India.
What do you do at the university?
I teach in the Politics, Philosophy and Religious Studies department, but I'm not on a permanent contract.
See what we can do about that. I think I've introduced myself. I'm Imogen. I also work at university in the sociology department with Bev now, and I'm also part of the Morecambe Bay Poverty Truth Commission, so I know quite a few people here today.
So that's probably one of the worst questions that I could be asked. Who am I? Yeah, well, I'm just Darren, and I'm a recovering addict. I'm part of the well communities. I live in Barrow, but I'm here at the moment. Who I'm at today, I'm here in Morecambe at the moment, looking after my mum, who has just come out of hospital. That's who I am today. So I'm a caring son.
I'm Mike, and I live in Leeds. I love Leeds. I love my city, and I came to school in Lancaster, but I've been working over here for the last couple of years with a lot of you wonderful people, doing a series of trainings called The Art of Hosting Conversations That Matter. I was here last week with CBS doing that, and I think there's something about, no, that's not who I am. That's who I am. Is that so? No, it probably isn't so.
I think you know who I am, but I guess I should just say I'm somebody who wants to get much more engaged rather than sitting in a library behind a desk or moving money around for elite programs. So I want to change my life. That's why I'm here today. Woo!
Okay, so I think there was a question that you thought was a good question for the panel to start by responding to, Andy.
Oh, there was.
From Sue?
My fault, misunderstanding. Anyone else got a question to kick us off? Yes, Mark.
Oh, right, I thought I was going to give you a sheet there. Do you want me to read it out?
We may as well, because no one else for it now.
I'm not sure I phrased it particularly well. It just came from the discussion that we had. We heard a lot about reality TV this morning, about this narrative, the reality television house. I just wondered what people's thoughts were about how news programming these days, could you consider news programming to be a form of reality television in the respect that it has a narrative it's trying to push about the other, about us versus them, etc.
Okay, so the question was responding to the way Bev had drawn in reality television, and I guess it's very hard not to understand austerity without understanding its mediation, how it's been represented. But actually, reality TV encapsulates these processes of devaluation and exploitation, but it's also part of government. So what Bev showed is actually how the same people who make the reality TV programmes and the politicians who then refer to them in Parliament are part of the same kind of ecosystem or class system that delivered the sorts of cuts and the consequences of that we're living through. So I guess the question, way to interpret it, we might ask it is, what is the role of media and representation in the kind of crisis that we currently face, given that if the media is a movement of devaluation, how do we intervene in media processes to defend people against that devaluation and create value? So I guess that's one way of interpreting the question, probably quite an academic way, apologies.
Well, that's exactly what I said.
Yeah. So to respond to that, who'd like to respond to that? Because I think that a lot has got a lot of us thinking what Bev said this morning.
So just very briefly to say that one of the ways that I would perhaps look at it would be to say in my own way, what can we do to tackle something. For example, if I were to take the case of the war in Yemen and how it's portrayed on television and how it creates this othering of people who are coming, and for my work as a volunteer with asylum seekers and refugees here, is helping people to understand why is it that people have to leave another country and come. And for my students to help them to understand what did Britain do 200 years ago or 100 years ago in terms of colonialism and its work in the Middle East, and help them understand that even now, by being part of the Saudi-led coalition, those people who are fleeing Yemen, we are complicit in getting them over here. So we do owe it, and we do owe it to these people to give them an opportunity or to understand the perspective from where they're coming. So one of the things we do in universities is help them to think critically about colonialism, and this is a very real way here in Lancaster Morton District that they can see what's happening in the news, what they see around them, is it all tying up?
Okay, so any responses to that around devaluation and sort of representation, the role of that?
I've got a friend who lives in Bradford. He's a young Muslim, an older Muslim community leader, said he's probably the most promising young leader that he's met in a decade. And Cameron has got to the point where he doesn't want to turn on the television, he doesn't want to open the newspaper, because constantly he and his community, people like him, are subject to value judgments, which then create a dividing line and a fault line through society. That a certain kind of politics, unfortunately increasing in that amount of politics, exploits that dividing line. And so that is, it's big, it's huge, it creates reality. And news programs a lot of the time look for that instant knee-jerk reaction. It's almost like clickbait. What's going to keep people, there are ratings for news programs. What's it going to appeal to? They want something very quick, instinctual, knee-jerk reaction, and there it goes. It's reinforced, and it is creating realities that are terribly dangerous.
Bev, do you want to say something? We've got a good question.
Not yet, no, okay. I was just kind of taken by this, sorry.
Okay. I want to echo that because, what we see, if you look at the BBC, it's become an absolute travesty of serious news. So the Radio 4 programme in the morning, which used to be every politician's go-to news space, is now become like a magazine programme run by the far right. And I do really strongly believe that Nigel Farage has been given so much airtime now as well as previously, that without the BBC, the BBC supported the move to the far right in this country. And I think that is shocking, but we know why when we look at their structures. We know that David Cameron, not your mate, made sure that there were a lot of Conservative MPs on the new trustee structure. They've actually now been challenged significantly in terms of the coverage. We know that the withdrawal of the TV licence has created, the threat of the withdrawal of the TV licence has created huge problems for the BBC. So they have to compete for audiences, and ratings is key. So they do sensation. Sensation is the key to get people to watch. But the problem is old media can't do sensation very well, and we all get really, really bored. That's why they bring on Nigel Farage. So then we turn to social media. Now, social media I would go to all the time for alternative news, and there's two really good, there's Real Media, there's Novara Media. You can look for your media where you actually have real investigative journalists. But the real problem is it's being controlled a lot of the time. There's not a lot of space for it, can be closed down a lot of the time. And then the other huge problem with social media is the power of people like Aaron Banks, who apparently is now going to finally be investigated. But the Cambridge Analytica scandal is really, really, really significant. We had the total manipulation of British democracy through social media, pseudo news channels, and very few people are paying attention. And his first fine was for £120,000 for interfering in the system. He pays that for one bottle of champagne, and that's how much he gets fined. So for me, the reality TV effect, because when we did the project, people go, why are you doing that? That's stupid. And it's like, no, just watch what's going to happen, because it's the move to the politics of sensation, the move to the politics of emotion, where everything gets judged in exactly what you say, Mike, really quick, infinite moments, and history becomes completely evacuated, as does analysis. So it's really, really worrying where we're going to get real news from anymore.
Okay, so I'm going to move to the next question. How do we let Darren know, and this is Darren, that he is equally valuable to us here today, but more so in our community for who he is and his life experience? So I think what this question is getting to is whose knowledge, the role of experience in revaluation, and how experience is pivotal to understanding the state we're in, and how experience can be a form of knowledge, not just working in university. So, I mean, we can tell you that you're valued. I'll give you a hug to tell you you're valued. But it is an interesting question about imbalances and hierarchies and how they're reproduced even in a space like this, in terms of what counts as knowledge and whose knowledge is valued.
Okay, so it's interesting that through what I said, being a recovering addict, how it was viewed that I needed to be valued, really. So my core belief is that I'm not good enough, and having worked on that for the past 13 and a half months, and it's a work in progress for the rest of my life, it's given me insight, and I see that everyone seems to have that core belief that they're not good enough, and it's suppressed or covered up with a type of with ego, basically. I see that in myself, and because of that awareness in myself, I see that in others. So I have no shame in speaking about my experience. I've had good examples around me of people who've been through similar to me, if not the same, and they're just living examples of the fact that it's possible to recover from addiction, you know. So yeah, I look to them, I learn from them, I listen to them, and I apply what they've learned to myself, and in that it works every day on that core belief system of mine that I'm not good enough, to the point where I feel like I'm beginning to be good enough, I suppose. Yeah, that's it. Anyone else?
I mean, that makes me think about where social movements come from. So we think about social movements in the 60s, the civil rights movement, decolonising movements actually to build the welfare state as well, feminist disability rights movements. They actually all come from what you just described. It's where people feel actually judged and devalued, but they turn that into what a famous African-American sociologist, Du Bois, called a double consciousness. So they have a double consciousness of their position, how they're positioned socially, but actually they use that experience as a form of knowledge to build social change. And I wonder if that's actually the wisest people are the ones who have that double consciousness of being in a split position, that they can see the processes in a way in which other people can't, because they've got entitlement and they've never had to question their position. So a lot of people I've been working with the Property Commission have that double consciousness. So that's something interesting, I think, for us to think about.
Measure the kindness.
I mentioned earlier on that we've done 4 our posting conversations training, and on every one there have been people from well communities there. For example, there have been lots of other people there as well, and every time somebody like you says, when we go around in a circle and say, who are you, why are you here? I'm a recovering addict, or I've been clean for 6 months. And you can feel everybody else in the room who's there with their badges and their lanyards, or maybe not, because we discourage that. Everybody goes, so it's all right. I don't have to pretend. And my imposter syndrome that we all carry has been punctured because somebody is speaking truthfully. And we see it again and again in Poverty Truth Commission, that the voice just cuts through all the crap of bureaucracy and systems and theories and whatever else. So, but there's something more important than that. There's a French Marxist philosopher, Alain Badiou, who says that we can only see what the state really does when we see what it does to those people who are excluded or marginalised by the state. So if we want to get a clear view of that thing that we're all invested in, then people who have been broken by it, people who are excluded by it, I'm doing some work at the moment with gypsies and travellers, they will give us a clear view of the thing that we're all invested in, constantly reproducing, and they will help us to stop reproducing it.
Okay, so that actually leads on to this question. Individually, what have you been judged on? Who have you made judgments on? So it's kind of following on from that question, it's getting us, I guess, to open up a bit about the ways in which we all make judgments all the time. And that idea of defensiveness also. If you've been judged, how you then get into a defensive position.
I think we all judge, and I certainly feel that being an other in this country, I can easily be, without even having a conversation with me, you could label me just by what I'm wearing or what I look. And so I've been at the receiving end of that, but I've also been at the receiving end, I suppose, of being able to celebrate that. So I look at it as a positive thing, and it depends on the onlooker whether they look at it as a negative thing. And it isn't an easy process, and I myself would judge. And I think that's just a very normal thing to do. The thing, I suppose, is trying to get to learn to be positive when we do that, and be more kinder and gentler.
Anyone else?
Okay. So yeah, we're talking to the 2 guys at the back, Ian and John, in our triad. And it kind of came natural to just be the listener and the talker, so to speak, and the witness. That's just how it flowed, but it came back to the same thing. Someone came out, I think it was John, came out with the quote from that Jesus guy about not judging others. I can't remember exactly how it went, but yeah, it always seems to come back to myself, really. Awareness of myself, a deepening of that, and then therefore also awareness of others. There's another question here though that leads on from that, isn't it? Isn't judgment a tool that we need to learn how to use? Example, to discern when to respond to needs. Feeling, sorry, yeah, feel maybe, sure. Yeah. it's very hard to get away from judgment because it's just ingrained within us. You know, how we perceive the world, what is black, what is white, what is this, what is that, and it easily, for me, becomes imbalanced, and I could be judging from. It's like when I'm trying to help somebody, I can all too easily kind of, you know, be like this. Yes, I can help you down there. You know, you need my help. I'm up here. You're down there, and I can help you. Or it can just flip, you know, and I can be the one down there, if you will. And it's just about trying to bring it into balance, I suppose, through awareness of myself.
So I guess there's a follow-up question relating to that here, which is, I guess, asking, does judgment sometimes have a place? So if we're trying to revalue people who've been devalued, do we sometimes need to make judgments? Isn't that part of what speaking truth to power is about? Is kind of reversing that process of devaluation and saying, actually, we're going to hold somebody responsible for the system of judgment and values. So it's trying to bring in, I guess, questions of power, looking at Bev, thinking, where does judgment have a place? Or does judgment have a place?
Well, I think there's, again, being referencing another French academic, Pierre Bourdieu, who was a bit like Freud, who says, you know, difference exists everywhere, judgment exists everywhere, but we have to work out which are the significant judgments. And for me, it's not reproducing the symbolic judgments through media, welfare, law, education that exists in the interest of the powerful. So I think being really cautious about those judgments. And coming back to the question, I mean, I always judge people in terms of their kindness. I think kindness is one of the most important things that make us and enable us to change and enable us to understand and move on. So I will always make judgments about kindness, always. And I think that's important because kindness challenges self-interest and selfishness and tries to make a connection rather than, you know, just doing everything ourselves.
After 7/7, July 7 bombing, it had turned out that 3 of the bombers were from my city of Leeds. And I said before, I love my city, and it was a shock to the system. And after that, the Home Office came up repeatedly, you know, where's the extremism in Leeds? And they got loads of faith people together, and they asked us how we saw justice, because judgment and justice need to go together. Should, they don't. I used to be a lawyer, I know that only too well. And we went around the room, and I thought I came up with a clever thing. Yeah, you need to make judgment, but then you need to have mercy. So judgment and mercy going together. And somebody who came after me said something that made me think, oh, I wish I'd said this. And he said, I think judgment is about restoring relationship. So if judgment is the end of the story, if judgment is about, I want to go from judgment to restore the circle of humanity, of humanising relationships, then our judgments, let's not judge in those ways, unless it's to do with restoring relationship.
May I just say something?
Yeah.
Okay. So, this is back to my mum again, right? She has been a constant in my life, and she's been the most non-judgmental person in my experience. It's been unconditional love that she's shown me. I was brought up with 3 strong females around me: my nana, my mum, and my sister. And I feel that's been put inside me, and it's just been about me rediscovering that feeling. And about six months ago, I witnessed, which for me is the most powerful demonstration of love, loving kindness, and that was between my sister and her son. Just that constant attention. He's only 5, my nephew, and that patience, constant patience and I just saw it in a moment, and I was kind of like, I was just overawed with it. Yeah, I think maybe in all of us, it's remembering back to those moments that we've been shown, to reconnect with it deep within ourselves, and that seems to diminish any type of judgmentality, or balances it out, should I say.
Okay, I'm going to move on to a different topic now, which is a question here about the climate emergency we face. So I think we face an austerity crisis, and a lot of us are engaged with that in different ways, but we also face another crisis, a climate crisis, and they're kind of linked, or our solutions should have to be linked, I think. So the question is, how can the climate emergency issues we have to face, how do we create a narrative that engages with climate emergency without othering and judging those that don't want to engage with that? So who asked the question?
Me.
Okay, so are you kind of saying that climate issues can become another site of judgment, potentially, socially?
Yeah, because, you know, thankfully there's a narrative now around climate emergency and all those things, so we're going to have a new, you can see what's going to happen. There's going to be a new way to judge people on how they react to the climate emergency, and if they put their head in the sand and it's just too much, they're going to be judged as not engaging with that climate emergency. So it's how you, if they are like that, how can you work to engage them, rather than just purely being judgmental and saying, well, you're just abusing the climate, you're abusing the resources, you're abusing everything like that. Because it's a real, there's this whole thing about how valuable you are. You know, it's almost the middle class thing of hair shirts. You know, we don't go on holiday to Ibiza. We go on holiday to Cornwall and do, you know, very wholesome things. It's that sort of dichotomy. You know, how do we not get into that situation? You know, we've got a real issue that we have to solve, and we need society to be on board with us, and we need to be able to love and it's about loving society as well. How do we build that society that tackles those issues without being very judgmental in the process?
I mean, these are big economic questions. What kind of economic model can succeed the current failing one that is also not going to deliver more destruction? And so it's kind of a question about how we address austerity. We find local solutions to austerity that also are about the environment and about how we love society in that way too. No growth, basically, models. So, do you want to respond?
So just very briefly, I think for a lot of these questions, I feel one of the big ways in which we could make differences through education, primary school education, and through the schools providing information and opportunities for young people to understand how it makes a difference to, say, marine life, plastic pollution, but also to people on islands very, very far from here, for whom it is an existential threat. It's not a question of if, it is going to happen. So helping them to understand, because they're going to be the change makers. And through positive role models or opportunities to do that, and through our everyday interactions, I think as we can't change the world, but in our own families, are we showing our children that single-use plastic isn't a great thing, that all the plastic that comes in crisp packets and this and that needs to be rethought. So we're not telling others as much as doing it and showing it. So it's like walking into a classroom, and do you carry a plastic bottle or do you carry something else? So what are you kind of trying to show to the world? So I think all judgment is based on some form of knowledge, and that knowledge comes through experiences, interactions, and opportunities to learn. So I think schooling is a great opportunity, and your family a great opportunity to kind of demonstrate how in small ways we can make that difference?
Having a conversation the other night with a friend of ours who's a Labour Party activist, and he was just saying how judgmental the hard left is. It just fragments all the time. And it's because they're idealists and because they want to see change. And we're here because we want to change Morecambe Bay to be a kind and loving region. Wow, wouldn't that be amazing? If that's what Morecambe was famous for, not just the Eden Project coming. But you know what? They're bloody loving over there. That'd be amazing, wouldn't it? Anyway, but there's a danger of idealism that we kid ourselves. And there's a friend of some of us in the room here who did his PhD on working class guy, background, addicted background, whatever. Did his PhD on social movements and activism. And he researched activists, people who want to see change, those idealists. And he said the ones who stayed the course were the ones who recognised that right through the middle of them was incompleteness and contradiction. I'm an eco-warrior. Hang on a minute. Look at my lifestyle, and it's only very slightly different from those people I would judge for not being an eco-warrior. Yeah, or look at my bank account, and I'm every bit as much a capitalist as those I would condemn for being capitalists. And so if you accept that I'm incomplete, I'm contradictory, but I'm just, this is my heart, I want to do this, then I think that saves us from some of the things you're talking about, maybe.
Yeah, I agree again, completely. I think recognition of our contradictions rather than being pure, because I think it's those who attempt to be pure and then impose their judgments on everybody else. And it's, sometimes we just don't even have the knowledge to know how to be pure. You know, it's like, climate change is a really complex, difficult issue in many respects. And I think it's Jason Hickel, who I work with Kate, you know, he's part of the degrowth movement, which we were told would never work, because apparently the narrative of degrowth, anything doesn't work. But it does work, because he argues very strongly and has a very good case in his book, Divided. And it's about how the most powerful ideology we have is about growth. So even more powerful than individualism, growth is seen to be, most politicians will say, you know, we have to grow, the economy has to grow. And we all just take it for granted, where in fact it's growth that's killing us. So, you know, if that's the most powerful ideology, and we've got Puritans putting into place that ideology, taking the moral high ground and trying to knock everybody else off it, we're in trouble. So I think recognising those contradictions, the difficulties, the lack of knowledge. I mean, I really feel I don't have enough knowledge and find it really difficult. And did you know that the majority of climate change debate on Twitter is all done by bots now, machine learning bots? So, you know, it's like we're in this world where even one of the most important debates we have is actually mechanically machine learned.
Leads me right beautifully on to this question. In a world where experts are mistrusted and facts are rejected if they don't fit the person's preconceptions or opinions, how can we use our knowledge to bring about change? Do we live in the post-truth society? I mean, it's exactly
Really hard, these questions.
It kind of goes back to the first question about media, doesn't it? In a world where experts are mistrusted and facts are rejected if they don't fit with preconceived opinions or perceptions, how can we use our knowledge to bring about change? So just like Bev was just saying about growth, if growth, the idea of economic growth is such a dominant idea and model for making society, you know, how do you challenge an idea on that scale that's so ingrained into the way every single institution works, into every metric that we're sort of increasingly driven by? how do you challenge that? Do we live in the post-truth society? That's really frightening thought, I think. I don't think we do, because I think this is a truth gathering, you know. So I don't think we do live in a post-truth society, but I think it's very difficult to find out who's just to think about truth at the moment.
It's very hard to get to the truth.
Yeah.
To wade yourself through the amount of bot-produced and propaganda.
But the growth story is itself now a fundamental untruth, masquerading as truth.
Yeah.
In that context, if you're post-truth or you're against experts, there is a grain of truth in that position, because you are at least aware of that there is something wrong with the narrative you're being fed. Now that doesn't detract from people who deliberately, cynically exploit that post-truth to say any old pile of crap just to sort of bring people along. But it shouldn't be completely delegitimised, because the fundamental tenets of the story that we've all been dripped fed is based on a lie.
Yeah.
Do you want to respond?
Thought. Truth, it used to be troth. I think it's the same word, the old English word troth. So in the old marriage service was, I plight thee my troth. Which in other words is faithfulness and trust and all those kind of things. So I don't think knowledge comes individually, and that's part of that problem, isn't it? We've been atomised into individualism, and I think we discover truth collectively in relationship, and we were doing this with the art hosting we were doing last week with 40 people who are doing community stuff in communities, and recognising that we work now in complexity and it's complex. There is no expert. Right? That's why we don't trust them, because it doesn't work anymore, that kind of expert. But if we're working with complex things, complex societies, complex communities, then there's just something about let's just try that and see what happens. What do we learn from that? And if we could learn together in a trusting, faithful way, then maybe we can discover some new truth. And if we're trying to discover what the truth of love and kindness looks like in society, then let's try some stuff. Oh, that didn't work. That's fine. We've learned more by not working than it did. So that's another way of looking at it.
Yeah.
And I really do want to say we need knowledge. I mean, we need both local experimentation and experience, but we really do need knowledge.
Yeah.
I mean, I was doing a thing with a group of international fellows, and they didn't know anything about the Indian genocide. You know, when between 25 million and 40 million Indians were killed in the interest of the British Empire. And it's like, why don't people know about the Indian genocide? Why don't we study colonialism in school? And things like this are so important. We need that knowledge to understand where we are now, to understand why people are being in particular ways now. So I think I want experts. They may not be right, but I want people who have knowledge. I want to learn both from experience and from knowledge. And for me, it's really, really important, the idea that we have a government that says we don't want experts. I mean, that's terrifying. Absolutely terrifying, because when they have commissions, who on earth are they going to talk to? You know, the next door neighbour who might have something interesting to say. It's like, it's frightening. You wouldn't ever not ask a medical scientist not to be an expert. They may not be right, and there's competing explanations, but you want them all in the room to have the debate. So for me, post-truth is terrifying.
I just say, I'm absolutely appalled that I've just put myself in the same box as Michael Gove.
No, you didn't. No.
Just to kind of build on what Bev said, I think also the way we can change the knowledge is to question the experts. But we don't do enough of that critical thinking or critical questioning. And I would say, my children in a local primary school, I was appalled that they have absolutely nothing in the curriculum from year 1 to year 6 that talks about what Britain did in terms of colonialism. Then coming back to Michael Gove, one of the things we're doing in university is trying to decolonize our curriculum, trying to get people to understand who said what, at what time, in what context, and how that links to power. So the British were in power, they ran the agenda, they ensured the curriculum was designed, or what they talked about was a particular slant. And we try to get students to question that, to say that could be changed, but you need to understand the context. My children in school don't understand that colonialism wasn't all very good. It wasn't all about building railways in India, that there was an enormous loss that happened. And I think it's really important that systemic changes need to be made, but in our own ways. Are we questioning at our workplace or in university settings especially, helping our students to understand, helping our children to understand that we need to think critically about why somebody comes from some certain place and the context of that. And I think schooling and education done in a good way could bring about positive affirmation of value.
Okay, so
Can I just come back on that?
Yeah.
I'm going to have to say something.
Yeah.
Because as an educator, we absolutely fundamentally agree with what you've just said, but we are within a system which is fundamentally putting barriers in place of schools being able to teach in that way. And it is doing it in a calculated way.
Yeah.
Because the curriculum, I worked with the Department of Education before this government came to power. I'm sorry, I don't want to be political about it. But we put together a curriculum which celebrated successful learners, confident individuals and responsible citizens as the three overarching principles of that curriculum. It was 2 weeks away from being implemented in Parliament when Michael Gove came to power and it was thrown out. And what we now have is a fact-driven curriculum and a knowledge-driven curriculum, which is forcing out inquiry, questioning, and the ability to think and interrogate what is presented as a truth.
Yeah.
And that is what this present establishment is creating within our children. It's the complete opposite of what has been presented on the panel, and it is something that we should be fundamentally worried and concerned about. Because teachers now do not have time within that knowledge-rich curriculum that they are judged upon and examined upon to actually teach the very skills and principles that we keep coming back to.
Yeah.
So we're in a 1984 situation now where the Ministry of Education aims to do the exact opposite, which is to make sure education doesn't happen.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
Even to the point where, when the new curriculum was first introduced for history, it said that you have to teach things in a completely chronological manner, and it presented a timeline of everything that was to be taught from Stone Age up to Margaret Thatcher was seen as the end of the history that we
I mean, I think it's a really big question to thinking about truth and what we mean by it. So this is global issue, is the shutting down of disciplines, the closing of particular university departments that teach critical inquiry. We're seeing Brazil, they just closed down every sociology programme in Brazil, for example. We see it in Europe, in Hungary, the moving out of the university out of Hungary that they thought was too critical. So in a way, there's a co-option going on of the truth, who controls what the truth is, by a particular political elite. That is very frightening, and perhaps our job partly, speaking particularly about people like me and Bev as well in this, is to call that out. But it filters down to the level of the primary school here in Morecambe. It connects the local to this kind of national issue, global issue. So I think at that point, lunch is ready. So I guess to sum up, You know, we need to be brave enough to speak the different versions of the truth that we create together.
Yeah.
We just thank our panel. Thank you.